After the British captured Philadelphia in September 1777, they needed to open the Delaware River for naval supply lines. To block them, the Americans constructed Fort Mercer on the New Jersey bank at Red Bank and Fort Mifflin on the Pennsylvania side to command the river approach. The fort at Red Bank, Fort Mercer, was initially large, but engineers reduced its size to make it defensible by its limited garrison. It was built with earth walls, a dry moat, a bâtisse, felled trees with sharpened branches, and wooden palisades, and mounted several cannons. In the preceding weeks, the fort's garrison had to train, gather supplies, and repair defences under pressure from British naval forces. As October 22nd, 1777 approached, British and Hessian forces under Colonel Carl von Donop were assembled to attack Fort Mercer. Colonel Carl von Donop assembled about 1,200 Hessian troops and artillery with orders to take Fort Mercer at Red Bank and open the Delaware River for British supply lines. The Hessians crossed the Delaware River using flat-bottomed boats under Captain Dowman, having sneaked past American defenses at Fort Mifflin. They then marched through Gloucester County, skirmishing with militia along the way, notably near Cooper's Ferry and Timber Creek, encountering resistance and delays. Von Donop divided his force into attack columns, one to assault the southern wall of Fort Mercer, another to attack from the northeast, and a reserve to guard the artillery and provide support. The Americans inside Fort Mercer, under Colonels Christopher Green and Israel Angel, were preparing for this advance, reinforcing defences and arranging cannon placements. At about 4:45 p.m. on October 22, 1777, von Donop's Hessian forces launched their attack on Fort Mercer. The Hessians first gained entry into an abandoned section of the fort, but found themselves stopped before the main wall because they lacked the axes and tools to cut through the obstructions like a bâtisse. Colonel Christopher Green ordered the defenders to open fire with both muskets and cannon at point-blank range, inflicting heavy losses. Despite being wounded, von Donop stayed in the fight, and after repeated attempts, the Hessian columns could not breach the walls. As cannon fire from American gunboats added pressure, the Hessians fell back, bringing with them many of their wounded, including von Donop, who later died of his injuries. When the battle ended that evening, the Hessian forces had suffered nearly 377 killed or wounded in their failed assault on Fort Mercer, including Colonel von Donop, who was mortally wounded. The American defenders lost far fewer men, about 14 killed and 27 wounded. The fort remained in American hands, and morale among the militia and Continental troops rose significantly after repelling a much larger attacking force. Though Fort Mercer's victory delayed British plans to resupply Philadelphia via the Delaware River, the British would eventually capture the forts after sustained bombardment and pressure. Many wounded Hessians, including von Donop, were carried off the field, treated in nearby houses and camps, though von Donop would die from his injuries soon after. Threatened by future attacks and aware of their exposed position, the Americans later abandoned Fort Mercer in November 1777, conceding control of the river to the British. While the ground attack on Fort Mercer had failed, British naval forces on the Delaware River attempted to support the Hessians by bombarding the fort from the water. Their heavy ships of the line found it difficult to maneuver in the narrow channel, where American obstacles, known as chevaux de frise, blocked the river. One British ship, the Augusta, grounded during the exchange and soon caught fire under American artillery fire. The flames reached the powder magazine, causing a massive explosion that destroyed the ship and could be heard for miles. Another vessel, the Merlin, was also lost as British sailors set it ablaze to prevent its capture. The loss of these ships deepened British frustration and delayed their campaign to open the Delaware for resupply to occupied Philadelphia. After the failed Hessian assault and naval losses, the British command renewed efforts to seize the Delaware River forts that kept supply ships from reaching Philadelphia. British General William Howe ordered a coordinated operation combining Army, Navy, and engineering forces to reduce both Fort Mifflin and Fort Mercer. Batteries were built along the Pennsylvania shore, and heavy guns were in place to pound Fort Mifflin on Mud Island. Day after day, the British bombardment intensified, with thousands of cannonballs fired across the river. The Americans, outnumbered and low on supplies, endured the constant shelling with determination. General Washington, encamped at White Marsh, sent messages urging the forts to hold as long as possible. Despite the overwhelming pressure, the defenses continued to resist, buying crucial time for the Continental Army to regroup before winter. By mid-November 1777, the relentless British bombardment had reduced Fort Mifflin to ruins. Its wooden walls were shattered, guns dismounted, and the garrison nearly destroyed. With ammunition exhausted and casualties mounting, the Americans evacuated the fort under cover of night on November the 15th. The next day, British troops crossed to occupy the smouldering remains of Fort Mifflin, securing control of the eastern bank of the Delaware River. From there, British batteries turned their attention toward Fort Mercer across the water. Recognizing that the fort could not be held without Mifflin's support, Colonel Greene prepared to withdraw. On November 20th, the American defenders abandoned Fort Mercer, spiking their cannons and burning stores to deny them to the enemy. The British finally gained control of the river, opening supply lines to Philadelphia, but the month-long resistance had delayed them long enough to aid Washington's army. In the days following the battle, the battlefield around Fort Mercer was littered with fallen Hessians and broken equipment. American and local militia buried the dead in mass graves, with care given to both sides despite the devastation. Colonel Carl von Donop, mortally wounded during the assault, was taken to a nearby farmhouse where he lingered for 3 days before dying of his wounds. Before his death, he reportedly expressed regret that his ambition had led him to ruin in a distant land. News of his death spread quickly, and even his enemies recognized his bravery and discipline. The American victory at Red Bank was celebrated throughout the colonies, boosting morale at a time when Washington's forces faced hardship after the defeat at Germantown.